Awesome.
Because I need to follow the instructions as I'm being told. Thank you very much for that.
All right.
And Jason, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Awesome. I can't click got it because my mouse disappeared. So hopefully I don't. Hopefully that's still pretty good. Oh, that's so weird. Hold on, let me
Okay, while Jason's doing that, everybody come off mute for a minute. And everybody on the count of 3 say, Jason, thank you for coming. Okay, ready? Ready? Jesse, you're still on mute.
There we go.
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
Jason,
thank you for coming.
Marhaba, marhaba.
Thank you all for having me. Awesome. All right, so I think I got my technical difficulty squared away for a while. Steve, it is really great to be back here again, 5+ years. So this is something that I'm really passionate about, coaching towards impactful product and really coaching on the product side of the house. And it's one of the things I started as a product owner years ago in my Agile journey. So I've always sort of been rooted in that space. And then over the years have meandered around to team coaching, organizational coaching program, and enterprise coaching. But lately, within the past several years, I've realized a sort of lack of focus on, if you all know the modern Agile tenets, sort of make people awesome, deliver value continuously, learn, experiment rapidly. I noticed sort of a lack of focus on the make people awesome bit. And so that's really where I've been honed in. And so I hope today to maybe share a couple of things that I could imbue upon you all to make you stronger on the product side of the house. So before we get started, this won't really actually take long. Soon there'll be just not that many polls, but a few short polls, and you'll just want to queue up that URL at the bottom on the ready, polyev.com/JasonHall110. You don't need to fill it out now, but you'll know when the time is right. Right. So thank you. So what do we, we're just taking a break here for a second. Stepping back, what do we mean when we say impactful product? First, I want to define product, because that can be a bit ambiguous. So by product, I mean a digital service or a digital product that you might use, or a physical product. It could mean even within a digital product, like you say Spotify is a product, or Facebook, et cetera, is a product. But it could also mean, a feature or just a small sliver or aspect of that product. So when I say product, I tend to mean the whole and the parts at the same time. It could also mean a service that you consume or get value from. So that's what I mean when I say product. And when I say impactful, I'm talking about, a product, service, feature, et cetera, that directly impacts the business or customer outcome. And I'm going to pause here because I think it's really important to track the distinction and how we got to where we're at. So, if you all remember 20-some years ago when the manifesto came about, and a bunch of smart gals and dudes came together and pulled together the best aspects of delivering really good working software, that was a struggle of the time. And over the past, over the next several years, the industry got a lot better at delivering software, right? So it went from years to a couple of months to now we are literally, we are able to push out code hundreds of times a day, right? This depends on the organization, right? And so you combine the fact that the software delivery process has gotten better, and one might even say it's been solved. Now, maybe you might be an organization that hasn't solved it yet, but that's another issue altogether. But also the amount of data that's available to us has grown tremendously, right? Between almost everything, the Internet of Things, everything has a sort of a data pinpoint. Everything has metadata attached to it. And so what that allows us to do is to really finely correlate, right, the impacts of the software that we're putting out with the outcomes that it's having. Something that we couldn't do before, right? Software has always been either impactful or not. And just because it took a long time to go out doesn't mean that it wasn't impactful, but it was so hard to measure that it was practically next to impossible, right? Well, that's not the case anymore, right? They have, if any of you have ever had the pleasure of working with any startup companies in the digital tech space that are fast forward, right? They can launch thousands of small experiments a day that correlate to many different outcomes, right? Both business and customer outcomes. And because of that fact, because we can do it, we now have a duty to do it. And now we actually have to shift our mindset. So now what does that mean? Now if I can now correlate the decisions, if I use a Strava app, Strava is this little activity app that tracks your cycling or your runs, etc. So you can see how fast you are in a given segment, right? Well, they have the ability to see how fast I'm getting over time, and they have the ability to correlate, different product decisions to whether or not I'm actually improving, right? And that is tremendous, right? So now, because that's now possible, right? It's not that working software isn't great. Matter of fact, it's necessary, but it's that the focus should be more so on the impact that software provides. And once we sort of shift and do that, then we realize we're playing in a whole different ball game. There are things that we have to think about and do differently that we maybe haven't done before. All right, so before I go further, I will admit, I know I'm coaching to maybe a predominantly DC crowd. I've coached in the DC space before. I know many of you may be in organizations that haven't solved the working software thing yet. So full disclaimer, this may be 2 iterations further from where you're at, but I still think it's helpful to know what are some things that leading organizations, digital focus or digital tech, digital product organizations are tackling and thinking about. What are they going to move on to next? Because you can sort of get out ahead of that curve, and right, you can help your clients maybe hurdle the next phase from where they're at to immediately tying and correlating impacts to their product decisions. All right, so now, a bit of fun. Here's where we whip out that poll. So can you all think of any products or software that function properly, right? Working software, but left you wanting for more. So right, all working software, very little impact. And we'll see where we go with this. So take a few seconds to brainstorm and throw that out, and let's see what you got. Yeah, and someone asked an earlier question, does Netflix count? In terms of that, 100%, they highly tie almost everything to impacts, and some of the things we talked about maybe will sort of resonate. All right, so nothing else, just Microsoft and Zoom. Oh, now it's coming out. Refrigerators. Well, that's interesting. All right. Amazon phones. Now, a few seconds more. This is actually harder than it seems, I know, right? Oh, now it's coming. Right, because I'm asking you, you've got to think about, well, what do I remember that I didn't like? It actually worked, but it wasn't that great.
Jason, your screen's
Mark.
not refreshing, so I don't know if you're looking at something that's different from what we're seeing.
Whoops. Do you all see oh, so, oh, I think I had this problem before. Do you all see do you see the results that are coming out on the
No,
screen
we
share?
just see the blank screen.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to read some of this to you. Or I think you all tell me if on when you're filling stuff out on your mobile device or however you're filling this out, you should be able to see the results there. Can you see it there? All right. I'll read a few of these if you can't see them. Phones, mobile, remote, refrigerators, Zune, Microsoft browser, Amazon, anything. I don't really know what that means. Deliver, bookmarks. All right, so here's a couple. Yeah, there's just a few things that came out. Yeah. All right, so I've got a list and I'm going to share this with you and you all let me know how that jives. So Google Wave. Google makes many great products. Wave was not one of them. Wave, for those of you that maybe remember, if you don't, you're not missing much, was a collaborative document thingy email. It didn't really have a purpose and a function, and they didn't really know what problem it was solving, and thus it does not exist anymore. Apple's Ping, that was their attempt to sort of launch into the social network, combine music with the social aspect. A few Facebook products. Facebook had a email service once where you could sign up and get email from Facebook. That died on the vine. But they had a separate app they launched called Notify that would notify you of all the things that you could already be notified in Facebook. So surprise, surprise, that didn't pan out too well. Daily deals, right? Something else that came out, right? All these things technically worked, right? They functioned the way they were intended to, but they had no impact. Right. So let's stop and pause a second and talk about, well, what actually really constitutes value? Does working software constitute value, right? Average revenue per user, story points delivered per iteration, PI goal, NPS, ROA find backlog. So here's what I want to do, and I'll see if this can work. I can't really see. Can I get all the participants on the screen here? I want you to use the reaction cue in here as I call these out, and you give me a thumbs up whether or not you think that really constitutes value, or you can give me a thumbs down if you don't think it does. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right. Working software. Is that value? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no.
I don't have a thumbs down.
You don't have a thumbs down?
I have a thumbs up.
Yeah, no, thumbs down is in the
Yeah.
list. If you click on triple dot, it will show up. It's just that not used that much, so it's in the other emoticons.
Yeah. Or maybe Zoom monitors, if they feel you've been too negative too recently, they sort of remove that capability. So I'm just teasing.
Well, that's
All
something that leaves me wanting.
Yeah.
I want that
Average
no button.
Yeah, and a no button. All right. Average revenue per user. Value? Yes, no.
Well, Jim makes a great point. It depends on who it's working for, but it might be helpful to make a distinction between stakeholders and customers.
That is, yes, I have that queued up in the next couple slides. But yes, that's a very good observation, right? All right. Story points delivered per iteration, or PI. Value, thumb up, thumb down. Is that not value? I don't know who put the laughing face. That's interesting. All right. Reaching a savings goal. Is that value? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, gotten some thumbs up. Yeah, all thumbs up. All right, you're passing the test. NPS, which stands for Net Promoter Score. Value?
Just understand, Jason, we're talking here value from the customer's perspective or value for anybody?
For it, right now, we're just talking about for anyone. And to be fair, you could mean either the business or the customer. That's a very good call out. All right. NPS, I only had one. So nobody wanted to go out on a limb for that. All right, we'll come back to that later. All right, a well-refined backlog. Valuable? Hands up. Fourth, three. We got 3 thumbs up, 1 thumb down. A well-refined backlog. All right, next. Nobody wants to call their shots here. All right, that's fine. All right, improved welfare or health. Value? All right, thumbs up. All right, so, really, actually, values, there's almost sort of like a sliding scale, right? There's absolute realization of value, and then maybe we have fit proxy to value. And then things that really actually aren't value in of themselves. So when I think of value, right, I think of like provide some deep benefit or impact to whoever it's meant to provide for, right? And so that could be, you're right, for business or for customer, right? Improve welfare or health. Average revenue per user. Yes, that is valuable. Maybe not to the user, but to the business. Faster running or cycling times. Reducing churn, which we'll talk about in a little bit later. Better finances. Improving your customer's lifetime value. That's a business measure. Improving someone's confidence, right? So that's a squishy one, but still value, right? The confidence to buy a house, the confidence to go food shopping, the confidence to navigate somewhere in a city that you've never navigated before. So working software is interesting. Working software is not value in of itself, but it's a proxy to that value. Just the fact that something works does not mean it's adding necessarily any value. It may or may not, right? It's a bridge. If you're in a digital perspective, it's a bridge to get somewhere. And in many times, it's interesting working with certain organizations that have a little bit more latitude about what they develop and how they, the types of the medium in which they work with. Many times, some of those organizations can actually, once they're able to sort of free up from the microcosm of the solution space, they've found that they can provide aspects of value that are entirely outside of the digital space that still relate to their business and their mission core, right? And so they've been able to provide, I think they gave an example of an organization that was it was a digital organization trying to improve finances for individuals. Once they sort of got out, hey, we are digital. Why are we doing this? We're doing this.
You're breaking up a little bit on
credit scores that contributes to an
Jason,
effect of their financial health.
You're breaking up a little bit on me. I don't know about anybody else.
Yes, breaking up a lot.
You look frozen, dude. Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely frozen, broken up.
Well, that's kind of fun.
Well, now it's up to you to jam on this, Steve. You gotta,
Steve, can you be a proxy? Can you be a proxy now for Jason?
No one can replace Jason.
He's back.
I think I'm.
It's not real value.
I think I moved. Yes, that was not valuable. I moved to my 5G network, so I hope that solves the problem. All right, let's continue where we left off, shall we?
Yeah, that sounds a little better.
Is that better? All right, here we go.
We have a
Play.
different view. We have a different, there we go. That's the view.
All right. Hopefully this is better than last time. All right, you all let me know. Yes?
We can hear you.
So far, so good. Okay, that's good. So anyway, so talking about this organization, once they realize that, hey, this is we are ultimately aimed at improving the finances of individuals by certain means, they were able to ideate outside of their solution space and come up with some other ways that had nothing to do with software, really. Like one had to do with finding experts in the field to host a meetup, right? Like that has nothing to do with a software product, right? But it still delivers towards the outcome, right? That's not working software. So working software can prove valuable, but that in of itself does not. NPS, which stands for Net Promoter Score, a lot of companies confuse with or conflate with customer value, and that's an indicator. What NPS is basically how well or how well your customers would recommend your company. They take they say they take the promoters, the people who would strongly recommend, and then subtract the detractors, the people who would not recommend. And then they average and baseline that out across other organizations in your industry to determine basically how well you're doing compared to your peers. How well would they recommend? So it's a very kind of sought after industry metric. Many people in the product space know about it. It is good, but it's a proxy. If you have a high NPS score, chances are you're doing something well. You probably are delivering value, but it'd be helpful to know what that is. All right, and lastly, I'm going to come down here to where I've seen us. Where I see a lot of Agilists sort of stay in this space, right? Sort of over obsessing about dependency, story points, delivered per iteration, PI. Is your backlog well refined? Not saying that this isn't not important, but when this becomes the bulk of the conversation, then I feel like we're missing the mark, right? A well-refined backlog, something could be very well defined and clearly understood and work as intended, but not really deliver value or not really deliver the things that are aligned with your organization's goals. So I really feel like that's a poor proxy to determining whether or not you have value or not. All right, and I have some things in the chat. Is that for me? I will now. Steve, you'll have to let me know when there are things in the chat I should pay attention with, because whenever I do this, my mouse disappears, and so it's hard for me to like.
Okay, Maura and Diana have a little conversation going. So Maura and Diana, do you guys want to weigh in for a minute?
Yeah, I had a question. This is Diana. So like, even with value, like I'm struggling with what is exactly value, because like I see an example on there where you said faster. But even with value, how do you know that that's actually working for the customer? So let's say you measure a car is going faster, you've made it go faster and faster, but the customer doesn't care about that. They care about a safer car, not a faster car. Just where do you get what is valuable? And then measuring it,
Absolutely. So it's based on, right? It's based, if we're talking about the customer, and it's going to be based on what the customer really deeply cares about. And I'll tell you in a few slides, we talk about how to anchor to that. But just to clarify, that faster was specifically meant towards running and cycling, like the physical activities of running and cycling. And that comes from the perspective of, if you're an athlete, right? That is something you absolutely care about, being faster. Originally I just had faster run and cycle times, but then I felt that would be ambiguous and people would think I meant like system run and cycle times. So then I just put a little pictogram of people running in a cyclist, so you knew what I meant. But you're right, like that would not be the same unless you're a race car driver. That may not be something that you care about, or someone who just likes fast cars.
I think the question is very valid, because every company provides a different set of values to their customers. There's a different reason why everybody pays for something. And I think that's a very challenging thing to determine. What is the value to your customers?
Absolutely. All right. So we sort of hit on this before, but I'm going to bring that little conversation forward, right? When we talked about value and outcomes, you all are correct, right? There are different stakeholders and perspectives that we care about when we talk about these things, right? At the fundamental level from an organizational perspective, right? Where normally we care about, right? There's value for the business, and then there's value for the end customer, right? And everyone else is really there to serve those one or two goals, right? Really sort of boils down to that, right? So, you know, when we say completed story points, right? Whose value is that, right? Right? Who considers that valuable, right? Oftentimes, someone who needs coach leadership. That's funny, right? Oftentimes, they're normally, you know, people in the delivery organization that just have sole responsibility of shipping stuff, right? Because it's about shipping stuff. So, did I deliver as what was promised, right? Well, there isn't really a right? There really isn't a collective agreement or correlation between that and, well, how are you actually achieving, how are you helping achieve both the organization and the customer reach their goals, right? Working features, right? Again, working features are most of the times explicit, are definitely necessary to get to the end value, right? If you take off the one use case I mentioned about being able to meet an impact, solve an impact some other way. But working features in of itself don't really offer you anything. And when an organization has their incentive structure on the wrong place, then you can actually miss value when you're delivering it. And I'll tell you, there's a real story, names and organizations redacted. I was coaching one particular organization, and I was talking to, this was the business leader, so this was a bit unfortunate. I was talking to the business leader about what problems that they were trying to solve in their organization. And they said, well, you know what, we just couldn't deliver anything. Like our biggest win, you know, she was complaining that she said our biggest win was, it was some feature, I'll redact the functionality of the feature so you can't figure out who they are. Our biggest win was some feature that took a few days. And yeah, it was great. You know, it saved several millions of dollars, but it was only like 2 days worth of effort. And I was sort of floored. I was floored that this leader, that business leader who should care more about delivering value to the business and the customer, completely missed the forest for the trees, right? She, in her mind, if it wasn't big, right, it wasn't sexy. Like I can't talk about this little feature to my stakeholders, right? Because it only took 2 days to deliver. But fundamentally, it was traced and correlated to something that saved the organization millions of dollars, which many of those other features didn't, right? And to me, that's an indicator that that organization's incentive structure is misplaced. And the people in that organization are not really focused on the things that really matter, right? So that's why I sort of overly emphasize the working feature things, because I see us really sort of focusing on there and not really focusing on the connectedness of it all. All right, so a couple of these other things in here. App usage, engagement, right? This is a customer success metric.
Put some effort and movement into. Everybody talk about doing. I know Turb got the bread.
Hello?
Everybody else.
Hey, what do we got? We got
Yes.
some, is that
You got
here we go.
question, or we just got a loose mic? You got a hot mic?
That was a hot mic,
All right.
I think.
All right.
All
How
right.
did
All right. There we go.
how did you fix that problem? The issue you're
Which
talking
one?
about? The one you were just talking about. How did you resolve it?
So I had to sort of work backwards, and I had to look at the incentive structure in the organization, right? Because clearly what that tells me is that leader is incentivized to deliver big things. So that's a slower long game, right? Because really what you have to do is connect what they're delivering back to the organizational strategy. And so you have to go even higher up. Okay, well, what are their leaders incentivizing them to deliver? And many times they do they really do care about outcomes, but it doesn't translate in their messaging, right? They tend to overly focus on when am I going to get and when am I going to see that? And when you can retell or relay that message and how that's showing up to the organization beneath back to those leaders, then you can more successfully get them to sort of re-anchor a focus to the things that matter, right? To allow their folks agency to sort of develop and to ideate within those spaces, but related to those particular outcomes. Yeah, that's a teachable story. That I definitely use that quote as a teachable story upwards in the organization to sort of show, like, hey, how are we sort of what's wrong with this picture? All right. So I'm gonna. Yeah, that's a really good question there.
All right. There's a couple of points. Let's see. Frederick Carter posted, isn't business value more about receiving it than delivering it? And doesn't business value need to be defined and agreed upon first?
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Jesse points out, one of the things with some of his product owners is what it provides the most value if it helps me keep my job.
Yeah. And so I think normally at that case, the coaching effort or work may not necessarily be with them, right? It may be with the organizational framework around them, right? Because if that's right, I can very quickly show the benefits of why an individual, a product owner, a team could care about the outcomes. And I've done this before. Once you can say, okay, well, you're delivering this for what and et cetera. Then they get it. They go, oh, okay. Right after that point, then it's okay, well, what do you want to do about it? Right. And if they don't have the agency to sort of renegotiate what their product deliverables look like and how they're going to work, if they don't have the agency to renegotiate what that looks like, then working with them further is an ill-begotten task, right? Because the effort isn't there. The effort is around them, right? The effort is kind of higher up with some more senior leaders about how they're enabling their teams to go. All right, so this is really good. This is, I think we're scratching a really good itch. All right, so one more. I won't belabor this too much because I think I talked about it more before. But these are just some like typical signs that resonate to me when I hear or see talk like this or things like this, that I tend to know that an organization is primarily focused on the delivery of working software and not the impact of that software, right? One thing, and this is something that's really easy to change, right? And I mean, maybe not really easy, but like medium easy, right? Like small, medium, medium. Program PI objectives, right? Whenever I see a program or PI objectives that sort of read like, deliver this. Our objective is deliver this functionality, search, sort, books, inventory, et cetera. There's a huge missed opportunity to connect. Well, why are you trying to deliver that? What are you trying to achieve, right? And so when I say that's easy, I mean, once you have those conversations with those leaders, you can then begin to sort of put more of those outcomes into the PI objectives. And it becomes less about delivering these set of things, and it becomes more about what impact are these set of things having. Other signs, right? Indicators that we might have an impact delivery mismatch, right? When most of the chatter in your organization sort of sounds like this, it is not uncommon, and it's probably very common for teams to celebrate the launch of big features, right? And this has ties to psychology that I won't go terribly deep on, but there is a psychological phenomenon that humans have that we gain satisfaction when we complete a task, right? By the act of completion, right, gives us an endorphin rush and makes us feel good, makes us feel like we're satisfied. That translates into why many people in organizations really focus on, have we finished? Have we delivered what we said we're going to do? Because it feels good, right? It feels good as a team to deliver some really big project that you've worked on or you slaved on, some super huge product initiative that, right, you pulled, heaven and earth to move to get to work. That feels good. And I'm not saying it shouldn't. I know it does, right? But the problems when we overly celebrate the delivery of some big feature or function, we make it next to impossible to pivot when that function and that initiative is not serving the impact that it should, right? It becomes really, really hard to do. I worked in another organization whose product leader knew this, and I thought this was cool. Caught me off guard at first. I mean, it was like maybe day one, I was coming into this organization stand up, and they said, hey, we just had the release of, blah, blah, blah. And somebody tried to clap, and he said, no clapping yet. And I was like, oh, that's odd. And then I went up to him afterward and asked kind of, what was that about? And he said, yeah, when we celebrate the launch of delivery of stuff, we're just celebrating delivery. We're not celebrating the confirmed value. And he realized that, right, once you anchor into those business and customer outcomes, right, you're going to miss a lot more than you make. And that's okay, right? Think about baseball. A professional athlete, professional baseball player who misses 70% of swings makes it into the Hall of Fame, right? If you bat a 300, you're doing really good. That means you're missing 70% of the time. But we've come to expect that because we know hitting a 90-mile-per-hour fastball is hard. Well, guess what, right? Solving big problems is really hard, right? So there shouldn't be this expectation that, hey, everything we deliver is going to knock it out the park, right? You should know, like, hey, well, let's deliver a few things. Let's reduce the risk, and maybe some of this will work out, some of it won't. But guess what? The things that do work out, those things that you delivered, and you said, hey, we thought this was going to reduce calls and improve our customer satisfaction scores by 10%. We delivered it last month. We checked the metrics. Yes, it's doubling what we thought. Then celebrate. That's where your celebration should be, right? All right. So I've beat that down. Probably that horse is dead and underneath the ground. So I won't touch it anymore. But anyway, this is just a sign or indicator to me that, hey, there's some work to do on the impact front. All right. So what's the first thing that we should do, right, as coaches? And this is where I would tend to say I've seen coaches maybe a little bit green on, is you've got to be familiar with what your organization's business metrics are. So this is to the earlier point. So I pulled this example, so this is going to depend entirely on your business, right? So I can't nearly tell you what your business's metrics that you should care about is, but I can tell you, hey, here are some leading average metrics that many software as a service companies care about. So when we think software as a service, you think of basically any digital product that you use, that you have to, you use on a service basis, right? Like the Facebook, Spotify, any streaming media service, right? That's software as a service, right? So these are things that matter to the business, and you should know about them and know how they relate, right? Average revenue per account, right? How much on any new account or any account that we have, what's the average revenue that user brings in? All right, customer churn rate. How many customers do we lose a month? Like, what's our attrition rate look like? Or how many customers do we lose, whatever your billing cycle is, right? Revenue churn rate, right? Which is a lot of times correlated with customer churn rate, but not necessarily. How much revenue do we tend to lose on a month or an annual basis? And this is a really important one. Customer lifetime value, right? Customer lifetime value effectively gives you a really good indicator of how profitable a business you are, depending on how many customers you have. So customer lifetime value is essentially as, hey, on average, so let's say I'm a Netflix customer and I don't even know what I pay. Let's say I pay $100 a year. I know it's more than that, but I'm just going to make it even, right? I pay $100 a year, and most Netflix customers, let's just say they remain customers for 10 years, and then they go and they leave, right? That means the customer lifetime value for every Netflix customer, right, would be $1,000. Right, so knowing this, right, you can see how different initiatives key in on improving one of these aspects. Because don't get me wrong, we have to do the customer outcomes too. But if you're in a for-profit area, you've got to find a way to make a buck, right? So that's definitely important. And for those of you, maybe half of you that are not, right, you're on the government side, right? You need to find out, well, what's the business metric that your organization cares about, right? In some way, I'd actually say you have it easier, only because most, well, you'll see what I mean here, but most government organizations, right, have a more altruistic mission, right, to serve their constituency. So it's a little bit easier to find what that is and work backwards. But if you're in a for-profit industry, these are some things to really know about and care about, right? How much money does it cost to acquire a customer? How much money does it actually cost to keep a customer, right? Every year, it costs us, say, $20 to keep, if I'm Netflix, it might cost us $20 to keep a customer. Well, that detracts from my profitability. I need to know what that is, right? So this is really, really important stuff. And if you are at all in the for-profit space, I would behoove you to steep yourself into what those business metrics are that drive the profitability of your company, right? And we'll talk about how that comes into play in a minute. Big, very important but. What happens when you leave the customer out and you're all focused on the business metrics, right? This is just one story, and I'm sure if I had another poll everywhere poll, you all could go for hours on this. But surprise, surprise, organizations deliver to what they're incentivized to deliver. So there was a recent study that came out about a number of dating app services that came from a number of employees in the product space that worked at these dating app companies, and they shared some rather insidious practices that these organizations were doing just to keep people, mostly men, on the sites longer and keep them paying, right? So one example is they realized that most women tend to log off of these dating services around, around like 10 p.m. and men tend to log on later. And they realize they'd have a problem if they have single young dudes logging on and there's no women there. And they're like, hey, I'm not gonna stay here. This stinks, I'm out of here. So what did they do? They hired a bunch of young teens in Serbia and Ukraine and Russia to pretend to be women, come up with fake profiles and everything just to talk to these men to keep them on the system longer, because they were incentivized by user engagement. That's solely how they were incentivized, user engagement. Not by a deeper customer outcome. So how do we get there, right? I think one of the, to make it a little easier, a good strategy to figure out what's a really true customer outcome is start super high up. And this is at the vision level, but anchor to one of the 7 dimensions of wellness, right? Because these have been fundamentally shown through sociological research. These are things that human beings tend to care about, period, right? It may be gray how we measure it, but it's not gray that these things matter to human beings, right? Financial wellness, physical health, spiritual health, environmental, good environmental standing, emotional well-being, right? This is something had some of those dating services been anchored to, maybe they wouldn't have gone that way, right? I want to feel like I'm emotionally connected to somebody, right? Intellectual prowess, occupational stability, right? And social belonging. So if you can start here and work backwards, yes, you may be many, many miles removed from moving on one of these needles, but it at least helps you anchor at the right spot and make sure that you are aligned in the right place. Then number 2, establish KPIs. So these are key performance indicators. How do I know that I'm making somebody more financially well, right? You establish those KPIs from the customer perspective. And this gets at what we talked about, value, right? So not from the business perspective. I mean, you'll have to do that eventually, but you want to stay in the customer's lens, right? So an example of not doing that would be if I said, hey, we want to make customers financially healthy. What's an indicator that we're making them financially healthy? They open up a bunch of our credit cards. Yes, great, more credit card offers. Like, no, that's a business incentive, right? How would customers define, how would your user base, right? How would they define those aspects of financial health? What do those look like, right? So you ladder those down based on their perspective. And then two, this is important, again, if you are in the for-profit space, but then you actually do have to tie those to business outcomes. Because for anyone who's here has worked in a for-profit venture, you know that in any business meeting, if you sort of go on and on about, hey, how we're gonna help the customer and this is great, you know, you may not get taken very seriously, right? The first thing that's gonna, that your first retort you're gonna hear is, well, what does it have to do with the bottom line? So you've got to be able to tie both of those two together, right? You need both of those, right? To sustain a business, but also to solve a real problem. All right, so let's talk about what does that look like in practice, right? So I'm going to take an example here from a fictitious company that serves to promote the financial wellness or improve the financial health of customers. What might that look like, right? Well, step one, the first thing we're going to do is which of those dimensions do we anchor to? That one's easy. It's the financial wellness. Well, what makes up aspects of financial wellness? And through user research, you know, it's if people feel like they can save for an emergency, if they can get rid of or get out of debt, right? Being able to plan for the future, right? This is how their customers would describe them being financially well, right? So once we figured that out, right, then you got to figure out, okay, well, how are you going to measure these outcomes, right? And so for that, I'd say you want to get input from a diverse group of people. When I say diverse, I mean, look in your organization. Don't just pull all the engineers or don't just pull all the product, but right, you want to get a sliver of, well, who do we need to ship that value, stream? Do we need legal? We need to get one legal person. We need product, of course, let's get a product person. We absolutely need engineers, let's get somebody there. We need design, let's bring somebody in from the design component. Data analysts, this is extremely important, right? Can we even measure this? Do we have the data on this? Let's bring somebody in there. So with those group of people, right, you can really effectively come up with ways in which you can measure some of these outcomes, right? And then once you have that, then you can start correlating those aspects to other outcomes of your business model, right? Then you can say, hey, it turns out our longest tenured customers, right, have these outcome measures, right? How do we help the rest of our customers look like them, right? How do we get them there? Right. And then once you've done that, once you've sort of established what those things are, how does this relate to where you're trying to go? Then you can start establishing and figuring out what the benchmarks are. Well, great. Now that we know how we want to make customers financially healthy this quarter or this year, right? We want to focus on the debt aspect. And we've said that because we know of our customers, that's a benchmark. That's a place where they're struggling at, right? This is the one spot most of our customers, half of our customers, you know, might be in debt, right? So then we can incorporate and bake that into sort of our product strategy and execution process, right? And then sort of finally, once you have that in place, how you organize is how you optimize. If you organize to deliver components, you will optimize component delivery. If you organize solving a wicked hard problem, a customer problem, you will optimize to solve that problem. All right, so now if we have that in place, I'm gonna get a little bit deeper about what might this look like in practice, right? How do we tie the small to the big, right? So on the left, you know, sort of don't pay attention to the right for now, right? On the left, I have a semi-fictitious example whiteboard of some it might be an awesome idea that someone in this company and this product team came up with. Like, hey, I have an idea. I think we can help customers reach a credit score goal so that, right, they might actually be able to get out of debt, so that we can actually help them buy their first home. And so if we look on the left side, right, your customer KPIs, if I'm tracking and going all the way down to the bottom, that bottom portion, right, when we're all the way down there, that should come from your product leadership. That should come from your business leadership. What are the goals? What are the goals that you're trying to move your organization to? Right. So a company might say in this space might say, hey, this year, right, or for the next foreseeable few years, we want to focus on Generation Z home ownership. Right. We want that customer segment to be able to more afford their homes. Then once you do that, you can anchor back into All right, well, how might we do that, right? So you might say, hey, well, one aspect thing, an indicator that we know that this might be possible is that we're seeing more of this customer segment get out of debt. Well, what's an indicator that that might happen? Well, the credit score starts to rise, and what's something that might help that? Okay, if they miss fewer payments on whatever bills they have, as an example, right? And then you can tie those to your business KPIs because these matter, right? So this thing that I have down here on the left, right? Of course we care about our customers using it, right? Feature conversion rate is what that's called in the industry. Like not just do they click on it, but do they fully execute the feature, right? So if I build this goal scoring thing, what are they going to do with it? The problem is most of the talk I hear about impact stops there. Well, it's valuable if it's used. No, not really, right? Well, what happens if somebody uses our credit score goal feature? Yes, we have a high conversion rate, but what if we look at the metrics just a month or two down the line and it turns out none of those people that used it, it impacted their credit score goal. And maybe as a result, none of those people, none of those people were in any different space in terms of their debt to income ratio than they were before, right? Then we know we're not trending in the right direction. That, hey, just because this thing was used, it's really not having the impact that we thought it would have, right? So these business KPIs get tied to the customer KPIs at every level in the product strategy and execution. And what's really wickedly cool is once your teams, even your engineers, don't put it past them. Once you make this clear to them, they can come up with some wicked cool ways at solving real actual problems, not just making your platform more stable or designing something really cool that gets clicked on. They're like, oh, you actually you care about them like getting out of debt or raising their credit score. Oh, well, we could do X, Y, and Z. Like, oh, that's awesome, right? So it helps, as a product person, it tremendously helps you out because you don't feel like you have to always come up with the big ideas. Right? If you sort of make it clear and obvious, hey, here's how we're going to get there, or rather, here's where we want to get to. I don't know how we're going to get there, but I know what it looks like when we're there. Right? You can really do tremendously awesome things. All right. So what about product roadmaps, right? This is a lot of talk. What about, I've seen, if you Google product roadmaps, I challenge you not to find one that just looks like a bunch of features on a yearly Gantt chart, basically. Well, the problem is that sort of mentality, that's a delivery focused mentality, and it gets away from what we just talked about before. So instead of that, right, what about something that looks more like, hey, for this quarter, this objective, right, or this quarter, we want to achieve this, right, business and customer objective, right? We want to expand in the working class Generation Z market segment, right? Or from a customer lens, that might look like we want our Generation Z market to be able to more afford their first home ownership purchase, right? And what we're going to focus on, in order to do that, right? We might be focused on boosting first-time savings rate, right? Because that's been shown to correlate to these other leading outcomes that we want. Right, so that's a first-time savings rate. That's a customer KPI, but then also, we think that's going to reduce our day 30 churn. Right, how many customers leave or don't become customers anymore after 30 days? And to do that, by the way, here are some things we want to try. So you see what we did there? We talked about in that first quarter. We talk about the things that we're going to do, but that's not the focus. The focus is the objective, how we're going to measure it, and what that does, that frees up everybody to go, okay, well, yeah, let's deliver this. But how did it actually plan out? How did it move or didn't move the needle there? And if it didn't, no love loss, no qualms about pivoting and moving the other direction. But when that top part is hard, that last part is impossible. Right? It becomes impossible to pivot. And then Q4 out, forget about it. Right? We're going to talk about building a bunch of features that are effectively nestled into a bunch of other hypotheses that you haven't tested or proved out. That's pure wishy-washy voodoo stuff, right? It's not smart, right? Not if we're talking about, if we're not in the innovation space, right? If you're testing things that have not been tested, right? So instead, right, you say, hey, here are a number of hypotheses that we're going to try. So Netflix, if any of you read, sort of how Netflix operated, and specifically in the time period when they went from DVDs to streaming, right? They brought in a wicked sharp chief product officer who got all this and said, look, our product strategy decision meetings are not going to be about you telling me what features you're going to try. You can tell me about what hypotheses you're going to test. Like, what do you think is out there? And we can give and get feedback, but ultimately you're accountable for not that hypotheses, but you're accountable for these metrics, right? And they had some pretty cool metrics now that were indicative of growth, right? Like how many titles you have queued up or what your delay time is, et cetera. And so they were focused on that, right? And so product strategy sessions were less about a dictatorial who's going to do what, X, Y, and Z, but it was more about sort of sharing what cool things do we want to try and experiment with. And this is really wickedly important. What are the results of the things that we've already launched in the market, right? There was no approval. It was like, hey, we thought this was going to increase the number of liked videos or whatever, and it didn't. Okay, great, awesome. Let's move on. And so that's really what effective product roadmaps should look like. All right, so getting ready to wrap up here, leaving you with some like more medium level tangible things to do. How do we actually impact some of this change? I talked about this before, but just putting it here, right? Focus on the incentive structure. So if your leaders or your organization, your product managers or your teams are incentivized to deliver stuff, they will deliver stuff, right? If they're incentivized to actually solve a problem, right, as measured by X, Y, and Z, the things that your leaders have already had conversations about, then that's what they will do, right? Interlink customer and business outcomes at every level. When I go into an organization where that left part is left out, the customer outcomes are left out and the business outcomes are there, I find ways to make the customer outcomes transparent. And I tie it to whatever we're talking about. And that goes for business outcomes too. Right? Get product design, data science, analysis, get all of their perspectives, right? They're going to offer you a different lens. Design folks will definitely offer you qualitative insights into some of the stuff that might be harder, doesn't really stand out in the data, but they go, hey, we looked at this when we talked to a number of these customers, there's some really poor sentiment on this aspect or this experience, right? So you absolutely need their perspective. So look at who's in the room when you're coming up with these things, get those out. And this is super important, right? Revisit every step of your product execution and delivery process from an outcome-oriented lens, right? This is honestly where I think SAFe has kind of failed us and other maybe scaling frameworks. Right? When we talk about deciding what do we want to do next, it should be fundamentally tied specifically to, I'm going to go all the way back up here, right? Your set of sort of business KPIs, what hypotheses or experiments you're running and how they panned out, right? I worked with a team that was able to do this and it was phenomenal, right? Because here they had, hey, yeah, you know that goal scoring thing we launched in the market? Well, we thought it was going to improve our credit score, these users' credit scores from this tier to that tier. And it actually did, it bumped it up by 6%. Is that enough? Sure, great. Then why don't we, what do we want to do next? Well, I think I want to scale this, I want to make the feature a little bit more stable. I want to do X, Y, and Z. Awesome, right? What about this other thing? We want to do something new, big, and shiny. Great, what outcomes do those link to? Oh, those are going to help turtles find turtle nests. Well, that's funny because that doesn't relate to anything at all in our product strategy. Like maybe save that for next year. So none of that is in there, and that's something that's absolutely critical, right? So you've got to find ways to imbue those outcome and value delivery conversations into your product strategy and your prioritization processes, right? Some other things in the bag of tricks here. Right, we talked about this before, right? If you're struggling with, well, what's a real customer outcome or not? Don't feel like you have to come up with it yourself. Use customer research to do that. Right, there's some tools, even you as a coach, you can, if you want to pay for it, right, you can go to like userresearch.com and you can solicit a number of customers or users that meet your organization's customer segmentation, right? And you can design a set of interviews around that to get feedback on some of these things that you're trying to measure about. Hey, is this something that you would actually really care about or not, right? So those outcomes should absolutely be informed by customer research. Tie product decisions to subsequent outcomes. Check, talked on that. Embrace qualitative fuzziness, right? As much as I talked about measurements, everything isn't sort of black or white. Everything isn't I saved or I haven't saved, right? There is value in some of the fuzziness, right? There is value in, if I say like, if I ask my kid, how do your favorite teddy bear, what value does that provide to you? And she's not going to give me, well, it makes me laugh 3.2 more times than it did by not having it. Like they're not going to talk like that, right? But there's a sense of, well, I feel safer, right? I feel content. That's okay. Sort of lean into that. Find a way to sort of add that into your success measures too. You can have both qualitative and quantitative, right? KPIs linked together as well. Don't accept a leader's first answer to goal-related questions, and this could probably be a talk in of itself. So one of the first things I do when I go into organizations, I'll ask the leader of that organization, hey, what does success look like for you? What does success look like for your organization? And you'd be surprised the answers that I get. Many times it is, hey, we just want to deliver the best possible blah, blah, blah. Or, if we could just get to Q3 and have X, Y, and Z, these are all delivery related things, that's success, right? I would challenge you to push back on that, right? Because then what they're really doing, I think about, are they really talking about those more intrinsic measures of value or outcome, right? And I found that if you delicately, but if you challenge a leader's position or really coach them through it, seeing, for the sake of what does that get you to, and how does that relate to what your organization is trying to see, they will thank you for it, and they'll provide you, with what the real impact is. A lot of times they have it, you just doesn't come off in the first response. All right, I'm going to come back to that last one because that's really important. We haven't talked about it. I'm going to go down to the last little bit I have here. So delivery cycle time and learning cycle time are different. You should really care about your organization's learning cycle time, right? So I define that as, it's the delivery cycle time. Yes, the time from committed idea to design, dev, test, deploy to production, but then also the time that it takes you to learn whether that thing, achieve the impact or the outcomes that it was supposed to achieve, right? So going back to the credit score thing, I'm going to do a goal coaching feature where I nudge users into making smart financial decisions. Well, that's awesome. When's it go to production? What's our delivery cycle time? Well, that's great. That doesn't tell you how effective it was. What I really want to know is how long does it take you from the time you commit to the time it's in production to the time that you realize, hey, guess what? Like we did help a segment of users pay down their debt, or we helped them to actually save. And here's how we track that, right? That's a really fundamental, important metric, your learning cycle time, right? That tells you how agile your business is, AKA business agility, right? Delivery cycle time does not. All right, and the last one, because I don't really get into statistics a lot, encourage the smallest sampling size necessary to confirm impact. So there actually is some numbers behind exactly how many people you should launch something to, depending on a number of variables. One organization I worked in, they knew how to A/B test, but for some reason they were defaulting to like 1 million users, right? They have many, many millions of users. And to them, that was small. But I said, hey, well, you really only need what, a 95% confidence that this thing is going to have the impact, right? Yes, okay. We're good with the 5% variance? Yes, okay. I went into A/B Tasty or Optimizely. There are websites that will do this for you. I'm not a statistician, so I can't come up with it. Plug those numbers in and told them, guess what? You only need to deploy this out to 3,226 people. Like, absolutely don't deploy it to 1 million, right? Because if you get it wrong, right, you've only, disappointed 3,000 people. Hopefully not the same 3,000 as the last experiment. But if you deploy it to 1 million, that's 1 million people that you've disappointed, or you've proven that out to, right? So getting the smallest sample size will actually buy you more leverage to do more experiments, right? Because it's less risky to the business. You're saying, hey, by the way, yeah, this is like only 0.05% of our user base, right? And then you can deploy multiple things and let them run in concurrent cohorts to see how those things are going to shake out. All right, maybe I'll save that for another talk. There are all more tricks on how to do experimentation. All right, and with that, I feel like the Micro Machine Man. Now we come to our very last thing, and this is my feedback. Of all the things that I've sort of babbled about, what things are you most curious about trying out yourself? And for this, since you already told me you can't see the screen, if you just stay on your device, you should be able to see different respondents' questions and vote those up or down as you see fit, or rather just up if you think that they are something that you care about. All right, so I'll give you a second. If you go to polyv.com/JasonHall110.
There you go. I just posted the link. In the
awesome.
Chat. And also, don't forget to add some things to the Menti word cloud for Jason. I'll share how the word cloud looks before we log off.
All right. All right. Uh-oh. You went away, no.
Uh-oh,
All right.
wedge break.
Sorry. Okay. Challenging leaders on difference between business metric outcomes versus mission metrics. Asking leaders about goals, embracing qualitative fuzziness. But can you all can see this, right? Maybe not on the slide share, but on your actual thing.
Yes, we are able to see it if we scroll down a little bit. And
Okay.
you may be able to load more responses is a thing you can do to click on load more responses.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Let me
I can see.
Jason,
Do you
answer
want me
the
to share
other.
my screen?
go ahead.
If you want, I can share my screen and.
Wait, somebody was asking a question.
Oh, sorry.
I just stopped to share so I saw somebody ask about those websites. And I have those bookmarks. I'll post them in the Slack. Smart. All right, I know it's here somewhere. The optimize.
All right, so Karen's writing us one. We can post things in the chat. So how are you, Karen? I hope you're doing well. So we'll post things in the chat. Also, everything will be posted on agiledmv.org. We'll post that in the meetup as well as on the Agile DMV website. So it will be there, and we'll post the recording because Jason did a great job, and Mona did remind me to to start the recording. So thank you very much for that. And we'll
All
also,
right, here we go. I found it.
oh, there we go.
There we go. There's one. Sorry, I was looking for, yeah, that is A/B Tasty, and they have a good sample size calculator for exactly how big your customer segment should be when you're launching something. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, okay. No. I think people are here to listen to you. I just wanted to break the silence.
Thank you, Steve.
All right.
So also, and if we are going to leave Jason with a word cloud. So if you would like to add things to the word cloud, here's what we have. So far, can everybody see the word cloud? Can anyone? Okay, I got some thumbs up. So you can go here to Menti. You can copy this link and you can paste it in. And you can go to Menti and type in this code. You can do that on your phone or on your computer. And you can type in as many words as you want. I went ahead and I added qualitative fuzziness and teddy bear points because those kept coming up. So I thought those were very valuable. We'll send this to Jason. So everybody come off mute. And how do you think Jason did? Come off mute for a minute. Come on. How do you think he did? Come on.
Awesome. Jason.
He did great. Jesse, Jim, it was great.
Yay!
It was awesome.
Very good. Whoop, whoop.
Uh-oh, Julie's getting crazy now. I don't know what
No, I'm just doing sign language.
That is wonderful. I thought it was great. Jason, how can people follow up other than going to Agile DMV and finding the posts? What can they do? Do you want people to reach out to LinkedIn?
Yeah, they can. I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat. Also my website. You know what? I realized I didn't go to the last slide, which had all that.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing.
Marketing fail, right?
Uh-oh. And
go.
say hi to Steven Sanchez. He came here kind of last minute. He heard about it late. And
hey, Steve.
Saying you need to market yourself better.
Yeah, there we go. Share.
So does Carrie, actually. So does Carrie needs to market the wonderful coaching circles she's got going on.
If you want to get a hold of me, there's my email below, and there's my website. But we live in a cut and paste world, so maybe I'll make that simpler for you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Were there any? I saw a bunch of things going in the chat, but something happens when I present, my mouse disappears, so it's hard for me to get there. If you all have any outstanding questions, I am more than happy to take them.
People love, the qualitative fuzziness. They love the idea of teddy bear points. Most of the discussions were very open, and everybody thought you were spot on. We did have a lot of conversations about, how do you define value, and the fact that everybody does it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the biggest struggle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what you need to create is how do you understand what your customers are really willing to pay for? What's really valuable?
Yeah. And that's why I think from a focus perspective, it is helpful to anchor to the core. If we're talking product visionary, what do you, as a product, what do you want to be known for? What is your, right? What's the thing that you're trying to drive? Like if you are trying to have people develop a better spiritual awareness, right? Well, that's great. You can anchor there. And then it becomes easier when you have conversations about, well, what about this? What about that? Right? You can go back up to say like, well, what does that have to do with spirit? And that doesn't have anything. That sounds really great, but not for us, right? Or even financial wellness, like, oh, this is great. We could do something that will make it easier so people can get to the ice cream truck faster. Like, well, that's awesome. And I'm sure they would love it, but I don't know what that has to do with financial wellness. So I think that can keep people grounded. And as you work down, so the hard work then is like, okay, well, how do we measure that? And that's why I said getting a diverse group to sort of buy in, right? You're going to toss a lot of things out there. and it may not be sort of black and white. There are probably 10 other things that I could have listed for financial wellness, but they didn't make the list. Right? But once you have that, then it becomes a little easier to have the difficult conversations about, I've led prioritization conversations in the weeds about tactical stuff about like, we can do this or that. And I'm like, okay, well, we said for the quarter, we're really focusing on helping this segment of customers, pay down debt, right? We actually said we're not going to prioritize saving for the future. That's later. We said this quarter, we're focused on the debt pay down. So how does what you're talking about have to do with that? And then the answers just sort of reveal themselves, right?
And that makes a lot of sense. Jesse Fuel actually posted boom when you showed that slide that had the true value from SaaS. So that was a very powerful slide. To get a boom from Jesse is pretty impressive, I think. I've never gotten a boom from him myself, so got to give the props there to you. And let me ask you this one question before we take off. Stakeholder versus customer. How do you define who you should be satisfying?
You might have to satisfy both, but you might need both, but fundamentally start with who funds your business model. Can you, if a horrible thing happened and you lost those stakeholders, would your business model collapse? Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. If a horrible thing happened and you lost your customers, but you still had your stakeholders, would your business model collapse? Probably. So I try to be really clear about, starting with, I always start at the, even if I'm working with a team way down in the organization, I start with, how does your organization make money? Who's paying for this product? Right. And then everything sort of anchors back to that. Okay, well, then how does that relate to, how do you relate to them? Okay, then you're not, while I may be getting orders from this person, you're not the end customer. I may have to satisfy your needs, but it helps me to know how you're connected to our end customer, right? It helps me serve you better. And then many times, unfortunately, sometimes the stakeholders you're working with, you might be more clued in than they are about what those actual outcomes are.
Often that is the case because the stakeholders may not be the ones that are funding your business, but we have to keep them satisfied.
Yeah,
they have their goals. So, any last words or questions for Jason? We still have sun outside on the East Coast.
We do.
Okay, everybody give him one last round of applause. Because Jason, I thought this was fabulous. Thank you so much for coming out here.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.